Good day, everyone. Richard Copperthwaite for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us for another show, and happy to have a guest today, Jenna Koloski with the Vermont Council on Rural Development. Jenna is the Community and Policy Director. Jenna, good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for hiking up from, Chittenden County.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it.
And you folks already will let you tell us about the Vermont Council on Rural Development, but you've certainly had a high profile in Franklin County. Swanton, Fairfield, Montgomery come to mind. I know Milton, anyway, but I guess the word facilitate comes to mind. And anyway, I guess you're the key person here. But tell us about the council. What do you folks do?
Yeah, so facilitate is exactly right. Yeah. So the Council on Rural Development is a neutral facilitator of public process in Vermont, and that means a couple of things. So primarily, our work is facilitating conversations at the community level. That's really the kind of core and heart of our work. Mm-hmm. We do also, over the years, we kind of add up what we're hearing in communities around the state, and we have facilitated at the statewide level, looking at policy solutions addressing things like the working landscape in Vermont, or the climate economy, or even a full statewide conversation on the future of Vermont, bringing in thousands of voices from around the state. But most importantly for today, and most important to our work, is this community facilitation that we offer, a program called Community Visits. And we've worked with a lot of Franklin County towns. We've actually worked with about 83 communities all around the whole state in the last 20 years. So that's,
if my math is right, that's about 1/3 of the communities in the state, or municipalities in the state.
Yeah. We get requests from communities constantly that are looking for ways to bring the community together, to identify priorities for the future, and then to help connect to kind of action planning and resources to get those things done. So, yeah, we've worked Swanton 7 or 8 years ago, Montgomery just a few years back in 2018, but also tiny communities up in the Northeast Kingdom to communities way down in southern Vermont, Barrie, Milton, some larger communities. And so any town or city that invites the facilitation, we only work where we're invited by local leadership, and then once we're invited, we really work on behalf of the full community, and right now have been invited by Highgate to facilitate this process.
And you said St. Albans City and Town have expressed some interest?
There's been interest from St. Albans City and Town, waiting for kind of final confirmation there, but it would be fascinating to work with.
Interesting.
As well.
But again, center stage, we'll spend a lot of our time talking about what's coming up in Highgate and the community visit coming up on, I should probably note for the record, we're taping this show on St. Patrick's Day, Thursday, right. March 17th. But the big event in Highgate coming up on Tuesday, March 29th, correct?
That's right, March 29th. Yeah.
So again, you would never go to a town on your own. You need to be invited. You're not going to take the initiative to say, hey, town, looks like you could use some help. We're happy to help you. They need to come to you.
Yeah, and communities come to us in all kinds of different ways. So in the case of Highgate, we were approached initially by town staff, and then eventually met with the select board. It's been, I think we met with them probably nearly 2 years ago,
really?
Pre-pandemic at this point, and kind of started that conversation. And now, finally have been able to offer that process, and working closely with the select board there, but also a whole group of other community members that kind of represent all different parts of the community. But yeah, we get referred to communities in different ways. Sometimes they reach directly to us. Sometimes maybe regional planning commissions or regional development corporations refer us, or we hear from a planning commission, but then ultimately meet with the select board. So it happens in all different ways. But that meeting with and kind of invitation from the select board is really critical to us, to have that local leadership really, kind of inviting and asking for this facilitation. Otherwise, it's challenging for it to be effective if the leadership locally isn't involved and on board. Right.
So the towns, once you get involved in the process, it's kind of, you're not going to keep leading them by the hand, so to speak. They need to be key people, especially as the process kind of plays out.
Yeah. So we do kind of, stay connected to local leadership. The first thing that we do, so this is kind of what we've already done in Highgate, is we build a steering committee of leaders that represent, or leaders and community members that represent all different parts of the community. So, in Highgate, that was certainly municipal leadership, planning commission, select board, town administrator, but also, included like school leaders. And often we try and bring in youth voices, farmers, business owners. So we really try and look at, we try and connect to lower income, populations in the community. We look at kind of all the different parts that make up a community. And they're the ones that really frame this process. So they're the ones that set the topics for discussion that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. They're the ones that help us to build the kind of outreach and invitation plan. We can bring that capacity for outreach. We want everyone in the community to hear about it, 10 different ways and be invited. But every community is different in terms of, the different networks, how the word gets out, how people connect. And so they help us to really build that. So it's really, even though we facilitate, it's really grounded in community leadership and community ownership, because our fundamental value as a facilitator is that we don't come to a community with any agenda. We don't even have a list of topics that Highgate should be discussing. That's not up to us, and it's going to be different for every town.
Will you make suggestions if there's something a town leaders or the steering committees not talking about that might seem obvious to you? Or you might make a suggestion, or you just purposely try not to even do that?
We really don't.
Really?
As a facilitator, I think it's really important to,
Yeah.
The thing is, what I've learned over, 7 years of facilitating, and from our former executive director, 20 years of his facilitation, is that you get people together in a room and there's so much wisdom in that room. Montgomery is a great example of that, where the community really came together with really different ideas about what was important. Montgomery is, it's a fun community. They have a lot of community events, a lot of connection, things going on.
I agree. Maybe I've never lived there, but it might be my favorite Franklin County community.
Yeah, right.
My old friend Tim Murphy, longtime former town. Did you deal with Tim? Is he one of the folks
I don't remember being.
That's okay. But no, it's a great town.
Yeah. It's a community with a lot of that kind of connection. And however, some people came in feeling like we really need more housing if we're going to, attract and retain young people. And some people, we need more childcare. We want to expand business. All these different ideas for the future of Montgomery. But when they all got together in the same room and shared all those different things, ultimately they voted one of their priorities was focusing on wastewater infrastructure.
Right, big issue.
Yeah, which I don't know if anyone came into that room thinking I'm excited about wastewater.
Yeah.
But in that community conversation, people realized if we're going to accomplish all these different goals we have, that's the first thing that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
And they've made great progress there with that initiative. So
Yeah.
we really believe in that kind of collective wisdom of the community and the room. And in Highgate, for example, I think they've chosen really important topics for conversation.
Let me back up. Just talk about the council. Where did the Vermont Council on Rural Development? It's not an official state agency, is it?
We're not.
Not. How long has it been in existence?
Yeah, we are actually authorized as a state rural development council in the federal farm bill, interestingly.
Really?
Back George Bush, the first, George Bush, kind of established these rural development councils. They're in other rural states.
So
around the country
other
well.
rural, so not every state, but other rural states
Other
in
rural
particular?
states, yeah.
Really?
And I will say, and I don't mean this to brag or anything, but I think Vermont is probably one of the more active
Really?
councils. But other states have similar, community processes, similar work that they do.
So Maine and New Hampshire have these also? Do you know?
Maine has one.
Maine at least?
I don't believe New Hampshire does, but
No,
certainly
really?
a lot of the western
Yeah.
rural states. And so.
And funding, where does your funding come from?
Yeah, so a couple of things about the federal authorization.
Yeah.
I should say, it doesn't come along with any funding or power of any sort. It does allow us to have a really unique board structure. So our board is made up of a lot of people who kind of aren't normally allowed to serve on boards. We have members of the governor's cabinet. It doesn't matter the party because we're nonpartisan. We have federal leadership, business leadership, nonprofit, and community.
You mentioned Tim Smith, the mayor of St. Albans, is on one of your board members.
Tim Smith is on our board as a kind of a community representative. And also as a representative of the Regional Development Corporation. We're close partners with RDCs and RPCs in the state. USDA Rural Development is always represented on our board, and then also all three congressional offices, a delegation. And so unique board structure. And then other than that, we're funded like any nonprofit. We're an independent nonprofit. We have members. We're a member organization. And then we have some very small amount of state funding and then some federal funds that help to fund these community visits that are competitive that we apply for.
Interesting. And
but
fundraising, are you always fundraising?
Always fundraising,
Yeah.
donors, members, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So kind of that whole
And how
mix.
big a staff?
Well, we actually, right now we are 6, going on 7.
Really? And Paul Costello, who I'm sorry I never personally met, but sounds like he was your legendary character, but he was exec director for about 20 years or so,
Paul Costello,
having fairly recently stepped down.
Yeah, was our executive director for 23 years.
Wow.
When they hired me, they were a staff of 2.
Really?
So we were 3, and now
Wow.
we're almost 7. So
Wow.
we've grown. And what that means is we've really grown in the kind of support that we can offer to communities. So we now have a team of kind of 3 or 4 of us working on these community visits where we have, skilled facilitators to run the process, but we also now have a full-time staff person who's actually able to provide follow-up support and technical assistance. So in Highgate, for example, whatever priorities they decide to take on, they will be community-led. We'll identify community chairs, community volunteers will sign up to take them on, but we have the capacity to kind of offer support to those community leaders in the long run, grant writing, connection to resources. We've always made those connections to funding and technical resources, but now we have that kind of in-house ability to help with the logistics and kind of challenging aspects of moving some of those major projects forward.
Right. So tell us about Highgate. Again, the community visit coming up on Tuesday, March 29. Tell us at least some of what that's going to entail.
Yeah.
And I know the free community dinner, I trust, will get a bunch of people out. That'll help, I would hope.
Free catered community dinner. You
Really?
never know what you're going to get with a community dinner. Sometimes it's just, it's simple pasta dinner. We've had some towns do pizza, but the select board is sponsoring a full, it's catered by the Phoenix House restaurant.
Great,
the
a
high
fine
school-
restaurant in Berkshire, a great restaurant.
Yeah, the high school jazz band's going to play music. So it's
sounds
going to be,
great.
a fun community dinner.
Yeah.
But it's also business. So there's 4 forums, and everyone in the community is invited to join this step in the process. So March 29th is the first step that we're inviting the community to share their ideas. And it really is, it's kind of like a big town-wide brainstorming event. So we think of it as like the wide end of the funnel, that we're moving towards priorities, but not on March 29th. This is all about just what's working, what are the challenges, and then importantly, and where we spend most of our time, what are your ideas for the future of the community? So we facilitate the forums. The topic, so there's 2 forums you can choose from at 4:30, and that's either healthy and safe community at the elementary school or youth education and career training at the sports arena across from the school there. And then the dinner's at the school. And then at 7, after dinner, you can either choose from community fun, recreation, pride, tourism, and quality of life, or economic development, ag viability, and infrastructure. So those are the kind of 4 topics. You have 2 choices. And then we are offering just, something that we've added into the process in the last 2 years because it's essential, but also we've found it makes it more accessible to offer a Zoom forum as well. So an alternative at 7 p.m. is that folks can even just join from home.
Can they not do that during the first sessions?
Yeah, so the forum, unfortunately, it doesn't kind of zoom into the room where we're
Okay.
going to have the in-person. It's a separate forum, and it's kind of just a more broad topic on what's working, challenges for the future of Highgate.
Yeah.
So it's one option. I wish we could broadcast all 4 of the forums, but this is just another way to engage. There's also surveys, print surveys at the town office and the library that people can fill out to share ideas, and a website where there's an online form for surveys too. So, and we're also holding a youth forum at the high school. So all these different ways to just collect ideas, and that'll be the March 29th kind of goal is idea collection and brainstorming. And then there'll be 2 more meetings So in April, we'll come back together on April 26th, I believe. And that's where the priorities will actually be set. So we'll do kind of a consolidation of all these ideas that are shared. You can imagine healthy and safe community and youth education and career training. There's ideas that are going to come up that are going to connect to each other. And so we kind of piece those together. We bring them back and put them all up on the wall, probably at the school gym. I'm not sure where we'll be yet, but that's usually what works well, because you can put the ideas all up on the wall, and the community goes through a process to vote on priorities.
It tries to winnow it down to X number. Is there a magical number of priorities?
There's no magical number. We always work with, so in Highgate, we have a chairperson, a local chairperson, who's our local point person in the process, and her name is Rebecca Manning. She's a dairy farmer in the community and very involved in the community. And so we would kind of work with Rebecca to say, what do you think's the right number? In a community this size, I'd say it's usually 3 or 4 priorities. I remember in Swanton's a little bigger. I think they had 4 or 5 priorities that they chose. Montgomery had 3. So it's up to them locally how many. And so that night, priorities are chosen, and people are invited to sign up for task forces to volunteer to work on those things. We identify chairs for those different groups, and then the final meeting in May is kind of a action planning and resource connection.
You folks don't disappear after that, but you kind of had a more reduced role as this goes on into the future, but are still available to facilitate and consult?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, even though we step back in terms of the hands-on facilitation, we consider ourselves like a resource and referral, group. We help with kind of technical assistance and coaching and support. We provide some training if the chairs are, new. And that's always a win, right? To me, I feel that a process has been successful when we have chairs that lead these new groups that have never led a group before, because we all know in all, communities this size, you have those 10 people that serve on every board, in town, and to bring in new, younger leadership is really exciting. So we provide some training, and we also have this, this staffer who can kind of help with grant writing, technical assistance support. We also so at both the March 29th event and then again in May, we actually bring a team with us of kind of resource leaders and experts that can be a resource to the community. On March 29th, it tends to be a kind of, we look at these 4 topics: healthy and safe community, youth education, community fund, economic development. We build a team of kind of state kind of visionaries on these topics, and they join us, and they're instructed that they're not there to give speeches, which is unusual for some of these folks, but they're there really as listeners, and they share some reflections at the end of the forum. But we have folks like Tate Brooks, who I believe is a local here.
Tate well.
Deputy Secretary of the Agency of Commerce, he's coming with us. Leaders in USDA Rural Development, Tim Smith from the Regional Development Corporation, Catherine Dimitruk from the Regional Planning Commission, Vermont Community Foundation, folks that with kind of big picture sense of what's going on in the region and state with these issues. At the final meeting, we bring another team with us, but it's a little different this time. This time we look at, what are the 3 things that, 3 or 4, whatever the number is, that the community is going to be working on. And we bring folks who can actually provide a little more direct kind of technical assistance and resource connection. So who are the people that potentially have funding that they could bring to these priorities, technical assistance and support, and also other community leaders who've accomplished these things in their own towns. And we bring those folks to kind of share advice, share resources, that kind of thing. And sometimes I really love when you end up with people in that role who can kind of provide ongoing support. Oftentimes, the Regional Development Corporation, Regional Planning Commissions can do that, but also other partner organizations that can support. So that's our goal, is to kind of leave Highgate with priorities that the community has identified, hopefully, new volunteers, new energy behind those priorities, but then also those connections to resources to, make these things possible.
So again, after kind of step 3, the May meeting, but you folks, obviously you're always there. You don't totally disappear, but at that point, it's pretty much up to the community to consult with you if they're still looking for some help from you guys. It would be pretty much up to them to stay in touch with you.
Kind of. It's a mix. We definitely are
Yeah.
there for the community to reach out to. Alyssa, who's our full-time staffer who does follow-up, she will also sometimes reach out and say, like,
Yeah.
hey, is there anything we need or that you need that we can help with? And we actually also, and Highgate may be if we do another one, they may be in the kind of next cohort, but we've also recently started a new kind of pilot where we're actually bringing together all of the chairs, task force chairs from the last 5 communities we've worked with and doing a kind of like leadership cohort where we're offering some support and training for them in that role. So some of them have been doing it for a year. Some, like the Milton chairs, will have just started because we just wrapped up there. And so a chance for those chairs to, because even though they're all working on different projects, it's that same role of like galvanizing community volunteers, connection to resources, moving projects forward. So our hope is that we'll continue to do work like that to provide that follow-up support where these community leaders have stepped up and kind of put themselves on the line, for their community in a way.
Reaching New Heights, is that the official? Did I see that? Did I read that?
Yes, Reaching New Heights. Yes, that is the official. So that, again, that steering committee that came together, they set that name. And I think they really wanted to, hearing the deliberation, how they got there, I think it was important to them to recognize like that reaching new heights, like recognizing that like there's nothing wrong with Highgate now, right? They love their community. They're committed to the future of Highgate, but they're looking at, what else can we be doing? What's the next steps for us? And that's kind of what.
And I think your timing is obviously, Highgate's we had several shows right here on Northwest Access TV, but the big airport project, expansion of the Franklin County State Airport in Highgate, right on the edge of the town of Swanton, but voters in Highgate, approving bond issue to extend water and sewer lines here. So there's in the future could be a big boost to the area economy and certainly for Highgate. So the timing of this seems like good timing.
Yeah, I think that may be partly behind Highgate reaching out to us. I've certainly heard a lot about that. I'm sure it's going to come up in the forum conversations. And it's not unusual that we, sometimes we hear from communities in crisis, right? Like we worked with Vernon after the nuclear power plant shut down, and we worked with Pulteney after Green Mountain College closed. And so sometimes it's that, but more often I would say we hear from communities that are kind of at this like moment of, like what's next? We've got these projects going on, but are there other things we should be thinking about and connecting? And so it kind of feels like there's elements of that here. For Highgate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Taking Fairfield, another one of the Franklin County towns you folks were involved with, was there any particular thing they were interested in when they kind of got together with you? Was there any particular?
Fairfield was before my time
at
VCRD, so I'm not sure. Montgomery and Swanton I was involved in, but I wasn't.
In fact, I interview Swanton folks periodically, and certainly the Swanton Enhancement Project, but certainly, the task forces are still in place, and it sounds like there's still been some good carryover after your visit years ago.
Swanton was a wonderful process, and Molly and Hank Lambert were the chairs of that process.
Boy, talk about a couple of outstanding folks.
We actually gave them both Community Leadership Awards.
That's nice. I'm sure very
ago.
Deserving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Boy, the pandemic, Jenna, that must have, that make things, again, we're exactly 2 years into this kind of at this point. So that made it, I would think, a lot harder, or had to kind of change your game plan in terms of dealing with communities. Was that pretty tough 2 years for you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years for community engagement, for sure. Like I said, we actually heard from Highgate before the pandemic. We had actually a long list of communities: Barry, Bradford, Milton. Those were all communities that we had kind of committed to before. And actually, Barry, we had started. We had actually already had the steering committee. We were ready to launch forums, and then those were planned for early April 2020. And of course, we had to make the call to shut those down. And however, community engagement didn't go away. The need for engagement didn't end.
Yeah.
We took a little pause where we were working with communities on kind of response and recovery efforts. A lot of kind of community groups emerged that were working on supporting their own, towns through the kind of early days of the pandemic. But as that kind of waned a little bit, we did go back to community visits. We actually did 2, Londonderry and Mendon, fully virtually. So we developed some skills with the kind of virtual facilitation platform, and they were, I don't want to go back to doing them fully virtually, but they worked. We still.
And that might have brought in some people who otherwise might not have shown up for like a public meeting, possibly.
I think it did. I mean, as a parent of young kids myself, like it's hard to get out in the evening, and I saw a lot of parents, were like cradling babies while they were on the forum, or kind of getting on after bedtime or whatever. And I think it does allow. There's accessibility challenges for some people, transportation challenges. So we did those fully virtually, and then starting with Bradford was our first community back, where we started to do kind of hybrid processes. So we offer, just like in Highgate, offer a Zoom option, but also in person, and that's gone well. I think I hope that we see more and more people kind of able to engage as hopefully things shift in a more positive direction from the pandemic. I think that has, people are busy and preoccupied and have a lot going on in their lives. However, we've still seen that like drive in communities to find what's next, to get things done, and we're continuing to see communities accomplish really exciting projects coming out of these. So, we've adapted and added some new features to the process, but it goes on.
How many towns, cities are you involved with at any one time? Or it sounds like maybe everybody you've ever dealt with, but kind of on the front lines or in the first 1, 2, or 3 steps.
Yeah, we're only really working with one community at a time. We really devote kind of all our resources. There's some overlap. We're actually next month starting in Brownington as well, up in the Northeast Kingdom. But really we try and focus, a lot of the process is all about the outreach. And, we're often asked to come and speak about, because typically, we usually engage about, in this community this size, 150, 200 people, engaging in the process. And, often we get questions from the town, like, we can't even get 50 people at town meeting day or whatever. And I get it. It's hard to get people out to events. What we have is a full-time, 2 full-time staffers dedicated to outreach efforts. So when we're asked to talk about outreach and strategy, people want to know, like, what's the secret? Like, what's the silver bullet to getting people to show up? And unfortunately, it's just time. It's knocking on doors. It's making phone calls. It's, getting a flyer home with every kid in the school, every person that comes in the library, whatever it is. And so that's what we can kind of bring. Down to
a little under 2 minutes. So for Highgate residents, can they just show up at these events, or should they kind of register ahead of time?
No, they can just show up.
Then again, Tuesday, March 29th is a key date in the evening, basically.
Yep, Tuesday, March 29th, 4:30 is when those first forums start at the elementary school in the sports arena. Community dinners at 6 with music and catering. 7 are those last 2 forums, and then there's the Zoom at 7 as an option to participate.
So just so people can literally just show up for those.
Yeah, they can show up, and there's all these details are on. There's a Highgate Reaching New Heights website that's fully dedicated to this. Maybe we can pull it up on the screen or something, but it's bit.ly/HighgateVT. And so on that website is all these details and the Zoom links in order to access the Zoom. And the survey is on there. So there's also that online survey. If folks just aren't available to come on March 29th, they can still share their ideas that way. And it all goes in the same bucket to bring back a month later. So our hope is that we hear, have a strong turnout in the community, and that we hear from, these processes are only as effective as, the voices that come out to participate. And so we want to hear from as many people as we can.
But it sounds like Highgate will be getting a lot of, but that gets pretty much the focus of the council. I mean, Highgate gets a lot of attention. I mean, they're kind of center stage there for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Anyway, well, thanks for covering a lot of ground. That's going to do it time-wise. Many thanks to Jenna Koloski with the Vermont Council on Rural Development, the Community and Policy Director. Thanks for your time. Good luck with Highgate.
Thanks so much.
Sounds like a great initiative. I'm Richard Cobrathwaite. Thanks for watching us on Northwest Access TV. See you next time.